Nobody ever told you this, but I will. Fear isn't your enemy. Your enemy is living without knowing who you are. I stood before the United States government, the most powerful nation on earth, and said no. I was 25 years old, I knew they could take everything from me, and they did. 3.5 years of my prime, gone. Millions of dollars, gone. But here's what they couldn't understand. I wasn't afraid of going to jail because I was more afraid of something else. See, there's a fear worse than prison, worse than poverty, worse than death itself. And once you know what that fear is, nothing in this world can touch you. Listen, I know why you're here. You're carrying something heavy. Maybe it's fear of what people think. Maybe it's fear of losing what you got. Maybe it's fear of standing up and being wrong, or standing up and being alone. I've seen it in a million faces across this world, people living small because fear is living large inside them. You wake up and you know there's something you should do, something you should say, someone you should become. But fear whispers, not today, not you, you're not strong enough. And so, you wait, you compromise, you live quiet when your soul is screaming. Here's what I know that you need to know. Fear never goes away by being comfortable. Fear only disappears when you find something you're more afraid to lose. For me, that something was my soul, my truth, my relationship with God. They could take my title, I'd survive. They could take my money, I'd survive. But if I took one step forward that day in Houston, if I went against what I knew in my heart was right, I would lose myself. And that, my friend, was a fear greater than anything the government could do to me. The world tried to make me believe that losing my career was the worst thing that could happen, but I'll tell you what's worse. Looking in the mirror and not recognizing the person staring back, going to bed every night knowing you betrayed yourself. That's the real prison. What you're going to get from this conversation is this. You're going to learn the one thing that makes fear powerless. You're going to see how faith isn't just some religious word. It's a weapon, a shield, a foundation that can't be shaken. You're going to hear stories from my life where I had to choose between fear and freedom. And you're going to walk away with a practice, something real, something you can do starting today that will anchor you when the storms come. I'm not going to give you motivational speeches. I'm not going to tell you that you can do anything if you just believe hard enough. What I'm going to give you is truth. Raw, tested, battle-proven truth. The kind of truth that held me up when the world tried to push me down. This isn't about becoming fearless. This is about becoming free. Let me take you back. Not to the ring, to the real fights. The ones that shaped everything. Before I could conquer any fear, I had to understand what fear actually was. I told you I stood before the government, but before that, before any of that, I had to face something simpler, an airplane. This was 1960. I'm 18 years old, won the Golden Gloves, and now they want me to fly to Rome for the Olympics. First flight to California for the trials, we hit turbulence so bad I thought we were going down. I gripped that armrest so tight my knuckles went white. My stomach was in my throat. The plane was shaking and dipping, and I could see the wings out the window looking like they were going to snap off. I told Joe Martin, my trainer, if I can't take a boat or a train to Rome, I ain't going. And I meant it. All I could see in my mind was that plane exploding over the ocean, me sinking into the black water, no way out. I thought about what happens if an engine blows up in the middle of the Atlantic. Where would we land? Would we even have time to get life rafts out? And if we did get into a life raft, how long before someone finds us? What if a shark comes and punctures it? These thoughts wouldn't stop. Even now, when I fly, when a plane starts bumping and the wings start flexing, I think, boy, I should have taken a train. That fear was real as the ground under my feet. But then my father said something I never forgot. Always confront the things you fear. And I realized, if I don't get on that plane, I give up my dream before I even start. Fear wins without throwing a single punch. I'd be back in Louisville, always wondering what could have been. Always knowing I let fear make the choice for me. So I got on that plane to Rome. Was I still scared? Yes. My heart was pounding the whole way. But I did it anyway. And you know what I learned? Fear doesn't have to go away for you to move forward. Courage isn't the absence of fear. Courage is fear walking in the direction of truth anyway. That Olympic gold medal I won, it didn't just come from my fists. It came from facing that airplane. It came from learning that you can be afraid and move anyway. The fear didn't kill me. The fear didn't stop me. I just brought the fear with me and did what I needed to do. See, most people think they have to wait until they're not afraid anymore. They think bravery means not feeling fear, but that's not how it works. Bravery is doing the right thing even when your hands are shaking, even when your stomach is tight, even when your mind is screaming at you to turn around. You feel the fear, you acknowledge it, and then you tell it, you're coming along for the ride but you're not driving. That's what I learned on that plane. Fear can be in the car, but it doesn't get the steering wheel. Now let me tell you about a different kind of fear, the fear of losing who you are. In 1964, right after I beat Sonny Liston and became heavyweight champion, I did something that made people angrier than any punch I ever threw. I changed my name. Cassius Clay was dead. Muhammad Ali was born. You have to understand what that meant. Cassius Clay was a slave name, the name of the man who owned my great-great-grandfather, and I was carrying it around like it was mine. But it wasn't. It was a chain. So I broke it. The world went crazy. Sports writers refused to call me by my new name. They kept writing Cassius Clay in their articles like I hadn't said anything. They said I was disrespecting my parents, disrespecting America, disrespecting myself. Even people who loved me couldn't understand. My own mama and daddy, they didn't want me to change it. They thought I was making trouble for myself. And they were right. I was making trouble, but it was the right kind of trouble. Here's what I knew. If I kept a name that wasn't truly mine, I'd be living a lie every single day. Every time someone called me Cassius Clay, I'd feel like I was bowing down to the people who enslaved my ancestors. I'd feel like I was accepting a label that someone else put on me instead of claiming my own identity. That fear, the fear of disappointing people, of being rejected, of standing alone, that fear is what keeps most people in chains their whole life. They live for other people's approval instead of God's truth. I chose truth. And yes, it was lonely at first. Yes, it was hard. Sports announcers would say my old name on purpose, just to disrespect me. Fans would yell Cassius from the stands. Even other fighters wouldn't call me by my chosen name. But I kept correcting them. I kept standing firm. And slowly, one by one, people started to come around. Not because they agreed with me, but because they realized I wasn't going to budge. This wasn't a phase. This wasn't me trying to get attention. This was me claiming my identity. Every time someone finally called me Muhammad Ali, every time I heard my real name, I felt free. I felt like myself. You can't be free and be fake at the same time. You have to choose. And choosing freedom means choosing truth. Even when truth costs you something. Even when truth makes people uncomfortable. Your identity, your real self, is worth more than anyone's approval. I'd rather be hated for who I am than loved for who I'm not. That lesson prepared me for what was coming. Because changing my name was just practice for the biggest test of my life. April 28th, 1967. This is the day everything I'm telling you about came together. This was the day I found out what I was really made of. They called my name at the induction center in Houston. Not Muhammad Ali, they called me Cassius Clay. They called it 3 times. All I had to do was take one step forward. That's it. One step, and my life continues. I keep my title, I keep my money, I keep my fame, but here's what that one step would cost. My soul. See, they wanted me to go fight in Vietnam, and I couldn't do it. Not because I was scared of war, I was scared of betraying God. My religion taught me that killing people who never did nothing to me was wrong. The Viet Cong never called me names, they never enslaved my ancestors, they never denied me a place to eat or a place to live. So why would I go halfway around the world to kill them? For what? Because the government told me to? Because it would keep me popular? For months before that day, I tried to prepare myself. I knew what was coming. I'd been speaking out against the war. I'd been saying I wasn't going. People told me I was crazy. They said, just go, just do your time, you'll come back and still be the champ. But they didn't understand. It wasn't about the time. It wasn't about the inconvenience. It was about my conscience. It was about standing before God one day and having to account for what I did with my life. They'd take my title, they'd fine me, they'd try to send me to prison for 5 years. My prime boxing years, 25 to 28 years old. When a fighter is at his absolute best, they'd take those from me. I knew all this. I wasn't naive. I wasn't ignorant of the consequences. I just decided that some consequences are worth it. The government offered me deals. You don't have to fight, champ. Just put on the uniform. Just do some boxing exhibitions for the troops. You'll never see combat. But don't you see? If I did that, I'd be leading other young black men into a war that had nothing to do with them. I'd be the poster boy for killing in the name of a country that still had separate water fountains for black and white people. So I stood still. The officer called my name. Cassius Clay. I didn't move. He called it again, louder. Cassius Clay. I didn't move. One more time. Cassius Clay. Step forward. I stood there like my feet were in concrete. And in that moment, I felt something I'd never felt before. I felt an overwhelming sense of freedom and certainty. This was right. This was true. This was me. I refused to step forward. An officer warned me of the consequences of what I was doing, but nothing he could have said would have changed my mind. If I had to go to prison, I would do it, because if I didn't follow my true beliefs, I would never be free again. And they took everything. Stripped my title within the hour. The New York State Athletic Commission took it. The World Boxing Association took it. Boxing commissions in every state refused to license me. I couldn't fight anywhere in America. They took my passport so I couldn't fight overseas. The money stopped. The fame turned to hate. People called me a draft dodger, a coward, a traitor. They said I was un-American. They said I should be thrown in jail and they should throw away the key. But here's what they didn't understand. It was tougher to stand up to the US government and millions of people who turned against me than it would have been to go to war. Standing there in Houston, refusing that induction, that took more courage than any fight in any ring. Because in the ring, you know the fight will end. 15 rounds, maybe less. But when you stand for principle, you don't know when it ends. You don't know if it ends. 3.5 years I couldn't fight. 3.5 years of prime athletic life gone. I was supposed to be making millions. I was supposed to be defending my title, cementing my legacy. Instead, I was speaking on college campuses for small fees, trying to keep my family fed. But my soul was intact, my faith was intact, and I could look at myself in the mirror and see a free man. That's when I learned the secret. When you stand on truth, when you stand with God, fear loses its power. They can take your career, your money, your freedom, but they cannot take your dignity if you don't give it away. If I had taken that one step forward, I would have been afraid every day of my life. Afraid of my own reflection, afraid of my own heart, afraid of what God would think of me. But because I stood still, I was free, truly free. Now let me break down what I learned. These aren't just my lessons. They're principles that work for anybody, anywhere. Most people think fear comes from external things. They think they're afraid of failure, of poverty, of death, of rejection. But that's not what fear is. Real fear, the fear that controls your life, comes from one place, not knowing who you are and what you stand for. When I knew who I was, Muhammad Ali, a Muslim, a man who submits his will to God, then external things couldn't shake me. Take my title? I'm still Muhammad Ali. Put me in prison? I'm still a believer. Turn the world against me? I'm still standing on truth. But if I didn't know who I was, if my identity was wrapped up in that championship belt or in public approval, then fear would own me. I'd be afraid to lose what defined me. Here's the principle. Fear loses its power when your identity is anchored in something that can't be taken away. For me, that anchor was faith, my relationship with God, my submission to truth. They could take everything else, but they couldn't take that unless I let them. What's your anchor? If everything else is stripped away, your job, your money, your reputation, what's left? Who are you then? If you don't know, that's where fear is getting in. That's the crack where fear enters and takes over your whole life. You want to defeat fear? Know yourself. Know what you stand for. Know what you believe in so deeply that you'd rather lose everything else than lose that. When I stood in Houston, I knew who I was. I was a servant of God first. I was a man of principle second. I was a boxer third. So when they took away number 3, I still had 1 and 2. I still had what mattered. But if being a boxer was number 1, if that title was my whole identity, I would have crumbled. I would have stepped forward. I would have lost myself. This is what young people don't understand. They think their job is who they are. They think their success is who they are. They think their relationship status or their bank account or their car or their house is who they are. And then when those things are threatened, they panic. They compromise. They do things that go against their conscience because they're afraid of losing their identity. But those things aren't your identity. Those things are just things. Your identity is deeper than that. Your identity is your soul, your values, your faith, your character. Nobody can take that from you. Only you can give it away. Here's another thing. People remember me for the fights. Liston, Frazier, Foreman. But the greatest fight I ever had wasn't against any of them. The greatest opponent I ever faced was myself. See, I had to fight my own fear. I had to fight my own desire for comfort. I had to fight my own ego that wanted to please everybody. There's a boy and a man inside every person. The boy wants to play, wants to avoid pain, wants to run from hard things. The man knows that real strength comes from standing, from enduring, from doing what's right, even when it's hard. The day I refused the draft, the boy inside me wanted to step forward. The boy was scared of prison, scared of losing fame, scared of being alone. But the man knew that if I stepped forward, I'd lose the boy. I'd lose my innocence, my truth, my better self. So the man had to discipline the boy. The man had to tell the boy, we're not stepping forward. I know you're scared, but there's something worse than what they can do to us. What's worse is us doing it to ourselves. That's the fight. The fight to control your own reactions. The fight to stand by your values when your emotions want to run. The fight to be disciplined when everything in you wants to quit. Every champion I ever met, in sports, in life, in faith, they won this fight first. They mastered themselves before they mastered anything else. Joe Frazier could hit like a mule kicking. George Foreman was the strongest man I ever fought. But the hardest opponent is always the one in the mirror, the voice that says give up, the voice that says it's not worth it, the voice that says just take the easy road. You have to fight that voice. You have to train yourself to ignore it. You're not afraid of the world. You're afraid of yourself giving in. So fight yourself, train yourself, discipline yourself. That's where freedom lives. Now, here's something that changed everything for me. I learned that only God and love are real. Everything else, pain, sickness, old age, fame, money, titles, none of that is truly real. We give it power by believing in it. When people took my heavyweight title, they thought they took something real. But that belt was just metal and leather. It wasn't me. It wasn't my worth. It wasn't my soul. My faith taught me that the only thing that's real is the spiritual. The material world is temporary. It comes and goes. But your spirit, your relationship with God, your integrity, that's eternal. That's what's real. Once I understood that, fear couldn't get a grip on me anymore. How can you threaten to take something that isn't real? How can you scare someone by threatening to take away temporary things? They said, we'll take your title. I said, it's not real. They said, we'll take your money. I said, it's not real. They said, we'll take your freedom. I said, you can lock up my body, but my soul is free. This is what I mean. When you value what's real, honesty, integrity, kindness, faith, love, then nothing the world does can truly harm you. When you value what's temporary, money, status, comfort, then you live in constant fear of losing it. I've met rich people who are miserable because they're afraid of losing their wealth. I've met famous people who are terrified of becoming irrelevant. I've met powerful people who can't sleep at night because they're afraid someone's going to take their power. Why? Because they built their whole life on things that aren't real. Things that can be taken, things that will eventually fade. But I've also met poor people who are rich in spirit. I've met unknown people who are secure in themselves. I've met humble people who have more power than any dictator because their power comes from inside. Shift what you value. Put your treasure where it can't be stolen. That's how you become unshakable. When I got sick with Parkinson's, people felt sorry for me. Poor Muhammad Ali, look what happened to him. But I don't feel sorry for myself. Yes, my hands shake. Yes, my speech is soft. Yes, my body doesn't move like it used to. But those are just physical things. Those aren't me. My soul is fine. My spirit is strong. My relationship with God is deeper than ever. So what did I really lose? Nothing that matters. People also misunderstand faith. They think it means believing in things you can't see. That's part of it, but it's not the main thing. Faith is action. Faith is movement. Faith is standing on principle when everything tells you to sit down. I had faith when I refused the draft. Not because I knew everything would work out. I didn't. Not because I wasn't afraid. I was. But because I trusted that doing the right thing, even if it destroyed my career, was better than doing the wrong thing to keep my career. Faith is trusting God more than you trust circumstances. It's trusting truth more than you trust comfort. Here's what I learned. When you act in faith, God meets you there. He doesn't always remove the obstacle. Sometimes he gives you the strength to endure it. Sometimes he uses the obstacle to build something in you that you needed all along. My 3.5 years out of boxing, that was my wilderness. That was my test. And you know what came from it? A deeper faith. A stronger character, a clearer message. When I came back to boxing, I wasn't just a fighter. I was a symbol. I was a voice for people who couldn't speak. I represented something bigger than sports. God didn't waste those years. He used them to shape me into who I needed to be. If I had kept my title, if everything had been easy, I might have stayed shallow. I might have thought success was about winning belts and making money. But losing everything taught me what truly matters. It stripped away the superficial and left only what was real. That's what trials do. They burn away the fake and reveal what's true. So when hard times come, don't just ask God to remove them, ask God what He's trying to teach you through them. Faith isn't passive, faith is active. Faith moves forward even when you can't see the end. That's why it defeats fear, because fear demands certainty and faith operates on trust. Fear says, what if this doesn't work out? Faith says, I'm doing what's right and trusting God with the results. Fear says, I need to know the outcome before I act. Faith says, I'm acting because it's right, regardless of the outcome. See the difference? Fear is about control, faith is about surrender. Not surrendering to circumstances, but surrendering to God's will. One more thing people don't understand. If you hold on to anger, onto bitterness, onto the pain of what was done to you, then fear still has a home in your heart. I had to forgive the people who stripped my title. I had to forgive the government. I had to forgive the press who called me terrible names. I had to forgive the Nation of Islam when they turned their backs on me. I even had to forgive myself for my mistakes, like turning my back on Malcolm X. That's one of my biggest regrets. Malcolm was my friend, my teacher, he helped me become a Muslim. But when Elijah Muhammad told me to cut him off, I did. I turned away from him in public in Ghana. He tried to greet me and I rejected him. Malcolm was killed before I could tell him I was sorry. Before I could tell him he was right about so many things. That hurt. That still hurts. But I had to forgive myself for that mistake. I had to accept that I was young, I was confused, I was trying to be loyal to the wrong people. Forgiveness doesn't mean what they did was okay. It means you're not going to let what they did control your heart anymore. See, when you don't forgive, you're chained to the person who hurt you. They live rent-free in your mind. They control your emotions. You're not free. You're afraid of seeing them, afraid of the memories, afraid of the pain coming back. But when you forgive, you cut the chain. You set yourself free. Not them, you. They were never chained, you were. I chose to forgive because I knew that if I let bitterness grow in my heart, I'd become the very thing I fought against. I'd become hard, cold, angry. I'd lose the love that God put in me. Forgiveness is an act of faith. It says, I trust God to handle this. I don't need revenge. I don't need justice from humans. I'll let God be the judge. And when you release it, fear loses its grip because you're not controlled by the past anymore. Some of the people who hurt me are still alive. Some of them never apologized. Some of them probably don't even think they did anything wrong. But I forgave them anyway, not because they deserved it, because I deserved peace. I deserved to be free from carrying that weight. Unforgiveness is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. It doesn't work that way. It only hurts you. So let it go. Whatever they did, whoever hurt you, let it go. Not for them, for you. Now here's what you do. Not tomorrow, today, right now. First thing you need to do is figure out what you stand for. Not what your family wants you to stand for, not what your friends think. What do you believe in so deeply that you'd sacrifice comfort for it? Take some time today, sit down, get quiet, and ask yourself, who am I when everything else is stripped away? What do I believe is true, no matter what? What am I willing to suffer for? Write it down, make it clear. This is your anchor. This is what you'll return to when fear comes knocking. For me, it was simple. I am a servant of God. I submit my will to Him. I will not betray my conscience for any earthly reward. That's my anchor. When people tried to push me to step forward in Houston, I went back to that anchor. When people tried to get me to give up my name, I went back to that anchor. When the world turned against me, I went back to that anchor. It held me steady. Once you know your anchor, fear has to go through that anchor to get to you. And if your anchor is solid, fear won't make it through. Second, don't try to conquer all your fears at once. Just pick one thing you're avoiding because of fear and do it today. Maybe it's a conversation you need to have. Maybe it's a decision you've been putting off. Maybe it's standing up for something you believe in. Maybe it's apologizing to someone you hurt. Maybe it's setting a boundary with someone who's taking advantage of you. Whatever it is, do it. Don't wait until you feel ready. Don't wait until the fear goes away. Move toward it. Every time you do this, you're training yourself. You're proving to yourself that fear is a liar. Fear says, if you do this, something terrible will happen. But when you do it and survive, when you actually do it and see that you're still standing, fear loses credibility. This is how you build courage. Not by being fearless, but by acting despite fear, over and over, until fear realizes it can't control you anymore. It's like exercise. The first time you lift weights, it's hard. But you keep doing it, and you get stronger. Same with courage. The first time you face a fear, it's hard. But you keep doing it, and you get braver. Third, prayer, meditation, whatever you want to call it. Make time every single day to connect with God, with truth, with something bigger than your circumstances. For me, it's prayer 5 times a day. Every time I pray, I'm reminded that God is greater than anything I'm facing. I'm reminded that my life is in His hands, not in the hands of people who can only control temporary things. When you connect with the eternal, the temporary loses its grip on you. Fear operates in the temporary. Fear says, what if you lose this? What if people reject you? What if you fail? But when you're connected to the eternal, you realize none of that can touch what's truly important. Start your day this way. Before you check your phone, before you turn on the TV, before you start worrying about your to-do list, connect with God. Remind yourself who you are. Remind yourself what's real. End your day this way too. Before you go to sleep, give thanks. Reflect on what you learned. Ask for guidance for tomorrow. And when fear shows up in the middle of the day, return to this. Ground yourself in what's real. Let God remind you who you are. Fourth, and this one surprised me, I thought courage was all about me being strong. But I learned that when you serve other people, when you focus on lifting someone else up, your own fears shrink. Why? Because you're not thinking about yourself anymore. You're thinking about how you can help. You're thinking about someone else's pain, someone else's struggle. And in that moment, your own fears don't seem so big. Every day, find one person to serve. Help someone carry their burden. Listen to someone who's hurting. Give something to someone who needs it. When you do this, you tap into love. And love is the opposite of fear. Love drives fear out. I never walked into the ring just for myself. I walked in for my people. I walked in for everyone who couldn't fight back. That's what kept me going when I was tired, when I was hurt, when I wanted to quit. It wasn't about me anymore. In the third fight with Joe Frazier, the Thrilla in Manila, I thought I was going to die in that ring. It was the hottest, hardest fight of my life. I told Angelo after I won that it was the closest I'd ever come to dying, but I kept going because I knew people were watching. I knew kids in the ghetto were watching. I knew oppressed people around the world were watching, and they needed to see that you can get knocked down and get back up. Make your life about more than just you. When you do, fear loses its power because you've got something bigger to fight for. My daughter Layla became a boxer. When she told me, I was scared for her. I didn't want her to get hurt. But I supported her because I saw that it wasn't just about boxing. She was fighting for something bigger. She was proving that women can do anything. She was showing young girls that they don't have to be limited by what society says. And when you're fighting for something bigger than yourself, fear becomes smaller. Let me bring this home. You came here because you wanted to know how to make fear disappear. And I told you, fear doesn't disappear, but it does lose its power. It loses its power when you anchor your identity in something that can't be taken, when you face the fight inside yourself, when you value what's real over what's temporary, when you move in faith instead of waiting for certainty, and when you forgive so the past can't chain you anymore. I'm not special. I'm not superhuman. I was a kid from Louisville, Kentucky who learned to throw a punch. But somewhere along the way, I learned that the real fight isn't in the ring. The real fight is standing for truth when truth isn't popular. The real fight is choosing faith over fear, principle over comfort, love over hate. They took my title, but they couldn't take my name. They took my prime years, but they couldn't take my purpose. They tried to break me, but they made me stronger. Because I stood on something they couldn't touch. You can too. The next time fear shows up at your door, don't run from it. Don't pretend it's not there. Look it in the eye and ask yourself, what am I really afraid of losing? And is that thing more valuable than my soul? When you answer that question honestly, fear will bow down. You are not here by accident. You've got a purpose. You've got a calling. You've got something inside you that the world needs. But fear will try to keep it locked up. Fear will tell you to stay small, stay quiet, stay safe. Don't listen. Stand up. Speak up. Move forward. Trust God. Trust truth. Trust love. And watch what happens when you stop letting fear make your decisions. I conquered the world, and it didn't bring me happiness. What brought me happiness was knowing I lived according to my conscience. That I stood for something. That I didn't sell my soul for a title or a paycheck or applause. Do the same, and you'll be free. If this spoke to you, if something in here resonated, I want you to do 3 things. First, subscribe to this channel. I've got more to say, more stories to share, more truth to give. Don't miss it. Second, hit that like button. It tells me this message matters to you. It tells me you want more of this real talk, this truth that doesn't hide behind pretty words. Third, drop a comment. Tell me what fear you're facing right now. Tell me what you're going to do about it. Tell me your story. I want to hear from you. We're in this together. Remember, you don't have to be the greatest. You just have to be true. And when you're true, you're free. And when you're free, fear can't touch you. I'll see you in the next one. God bless.